Couple of things. One of the, I guess when my first year on the assembly, I think we were in the room together to hear a report on the 2 million degree shortage, I think at the time, that we were going to experience in a certain period of time. And one of the things, and I guess it's the elephant that's in the room, that we were informed in a very blunt way by the LAO, was that if we do not increase the college going rate of black and brown students, we will not meet those numbers. And their analysis was that the other groups, the white and the Asian group, had really tapped out in terms of student interest. You're not going to get 100% of all white kids to go to college. You're not going to get 100% of Asian kids to go to college. You get, but basically, based on their analysis, that group had been tapped out in terms of we've achieved the numbers that we need to get, and that we're not going to get to the 2 million unless we really deal with black and brown students. Now, this is what was presented to us in a very stark way, I think, our very first hearing. And I haven't seen much done with that issue, because we keep talking about this shortage of numbers, and we keep looking at the numbers on the piece of paper, and we see the population that's growing and the stagnation of other populations. And so this person very boldly said to us, we will not get there unless we improve the college going rate of black and brown kids in the state of California, period. And I don't know if you have a response to that, but when we look at the numbers, that's really clear. So then it becomes a couple of questions. One, K-12 does become a player in the game. I mean, K-12 does, as we saw with Black Minds Matter and seeing where black and brown kids are in achievement and college going rates, it becomes a major issue if California is serious about achieving the 2 million, okay, or whatever the shortage is. It becomes a major player, and you can't ignore it, because it's not like there are a lot of students who are, quote, qualified that just aren't going. There are a whole lot of kids who have not been properly put in place to be on that track to get there. And it's not that they're going to trades either, because I'm dealing with our trade industry, and they're not in the apprenticeship programs. They're not in those programs where they're going to become carpenters and electricians and so forth and so on. And we saw that even with some of the discussions about who's going to trade tech and how kids are succeeding and not succeeding in that area. So it's one thing to say, well, they're probably finding careers that make more money and not go to college. That is not the case mostly with black and brown kids. They're not going in those areas either. So it really is a tremendous challenge, I think, that we have to be serious about as we talk about the others. The other thing that one of my concerns, and you can address that as well as the other issue, I know advising is critical. I mean, having spent 40 years at the university with students and finding them in the fourth year with no advice and having taken everything under the sun and come to me and say, could you figure out how I could graduate? And I'm grabbing classes from here and there and everywhere, trying to make a cohesive, kind of coherent program for this student to eventually graduate. And it's quite a challenge, because no one's ever sat down and had a conversation with them, and they're just grabbing classes that would keep them eligible and keep their financial aid alive. So they truly need advising, even at the CSU and the UC campus. But the question is also, do we have enough institutions to accommodate this extra population? We've not dealt with that very much in terms of actual seats at the institutions. We know that certain institutions are overcrowded. We know that Merced is not, and so forth and so on. That becomes a challenge. We also have what we call education deserts, where there are no CSUs that are close by. There are very few community colleges. I don't know if Imperial Valley, I don't think they have a CSU out there, but they have a community college. So those students have to literally make a decision to leave home in order to basically attend a four-year institution that's state-sponsored and state-supported. And so I don't know, we haven't done that since we don't have a higher ed commission to really look at where are the campuses, how do we expand out, because the general concept, my understanding and the structure of our system was that we'd have community colleges accessible everywhere, and that we'd have at least a CSU within reach so that folks could go to it. And maybe the UCs, because they're fewer, you might have to move away a little bit, but not very far. But you shouldn't have to do that in order to get a four-year degree. And that was my understanding of how the structure existed. And when you look at the way it's placed, it works that way quite well in certain areas. But then you get into these education deserts where there is no CSU for 100 miles or whatever, and they have to literally move away from home to go. And for some students and families that are kind of homebound with either they're older and have children, or they just don't leave home very easily, it's very difficult for them to do that.
So let me just briefly respond in terms of equity. No doubt, we cannot get there unless we close achievement and educational attainment gaps. And in California, that means, yes, you have to improve them, especially among Latino and African American populations. Secondly, are there enough colleges? I don't know, and it's a good question. I can say there aren't enough slots in the colleges we have. And certainly when you look at student demand, it's very strong in colleges that are already there, and there's just not enough room to accommodate them. So, for example, the California State University system, I believe it's 17 out of their 23 campuses are impacted or have impacted majors, which means even the qualified students who are applying do not have enough room for them in their local area, California State University system. And I think that there is a bit of good news on the population projection side, which is the number of high school graduates, if Department of Finance's high school graduate projections turn out to be accurate, is supposed to be relatively flat over the next 10 to 15 years. So if we increase enrollment rates, it's easy of high school students into college, it's easier to do that when that number is relatively flat than when that number is going up. And for a long time, we've had big increases in the number of high school graduates. So there is perhaps a bit of good news there that we can accommodate some of this increase that would happen if we improve high school preparation and college readiness in a more financially manageable way than if the number of young adults or high school grads was increasing the same. And that's just simple demography of
Is our high school flat graduation rate because there are fewer students or because there are fewer students graduating?
So it's not fewer, it's about the same number of students graduating, even with some improvement in graduation rates. Okay. So there are just fewer people. There's fewer 0 to 4 year olds now than there were 10 years ago.
Okay.
And as they go through the system and eventually hit high school age, they're not going to be as many as there have been in the past.
Okay, I want to touch on a couple of these issues that Dr. Weber and Assemblymember Williams mentioned. The first is we allude that to get to the 1 million number, which is just college graduates, I think you would need something like 65,000 more a year. And this year we had a banner year in the budget, the best year in decades, and we had 15,000 new UC and CSU slots combined, right? And so, certainly the private segments out there, the University of the Pacific, USC, what have you. But then if you look at your report too, it's not just graduates, it's the advanced high school, more than high school degrees. And so there's the private for-profit colleges. And so that's kind of a touchy topic because some of these schools are right out of the headlines, Diploma Mills, Corinthium, DeVry, what have you. Some are pulling back our financial aid. And as we see, those are some of the schools that have the highest diversity numbers. I think 40%. I think it was 40% Latino. I forget the number in here, but pretty diverse, almost reflecting California. So, how do we? I'm not sure if you're the right group you want to answer this, but how do we deal with that? There's not a space at the UC and CSU community colleges to deal with this right now, especially UC and CSU. Do you have any advice on how we deal with the private education market out there? Make sure it works for the students.
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between, the private education market includes the for-profits and the nonprofits, and they tend to be very different types of institutions in terms of what they confer to students. What is still the case is that, of all the students who are seeking higher education in this state, only 28% are going to any kind of private, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, right? And in terms of the 4 years, and so, or overall. And so we need to be really cognizant of what our publics need to do because they're still going to carry the lion's share of those degrees. I think the private for-profits are very tricky. And I think what they do particularly well that I would love to see our publics do is they are much more aggressive in being able to do this information piece because they are doing the outreach and they are packaging students and they are getting them in the door. And so students are drawn to those institutions, the private for-profits, because it's easy to get there. It's just not so easy to get out. And people who are getting out are often getting out with a significant amount of debt. And so I think that, trying to figure out on the front end what it is that we would like to see our public institutions be able to do more of, and it's a heavier lift for them. They're dealing with many, many, many more students, and their cost structure is not designed in a way that enables them to do that.
I think in terms of the enrollment capacity issues, you're right. There are clearly constraints that we're hitting up against right now. But it's not just about accommodating more students in the door. It's also making sure the students who are already there finish. So when I do kind of the counting on this, there's really kind of three ways you can get to closing this 1.1 million gap. One is, you do need more students coming in as first-time students, no doubt. Secondly, though, you need to get the students who are already there completing, and that's going to give you a bigger bang than probably getting more students in. And then finally, we need more students transferring from the community college system with its tremendous capacity in terms of the numbers of students we're talking about into the four-year colleges. And that has all kinds of good things, but partly the enrollment restrictions at UC and CSU, or the capacity problems, are less when you're only having a student there who's going to be there hopefully 2 years, but actually usually doesn't happen either, which is another part of completing an on-time completion. So I think those are key parts of kind of the answer to getting there.
One last question before the next panel. When you talked to Ms. Baker earlier about what she should tell her kids, that high school graduates over their lifetime make $1 million more, 70% more with a college degree than a high school degree. So isn't there a little bit potentially a flaw in the analysis that finance says that we're flat and that people are going to go to college at the same rates as they have been? If more people are reading your report and there's more discussion as far as the value of college, and there's only McJobs out there with minimum wage with a high school diploma, isn't society more often to say, hey, we need to go on and get more higher education? And so that creates an additional kind of push on the need for more slots and access.
It does, and so here's the interesting historical fact. As more students have gone to college and graduated from college, as a higher share of the population has earned college degrees, which has happened. And when I was talking about the master plan success, that's part of that success. Is we had big increases in the share of students going to and graduating from colleges with four-year degrees. And as that was happening, that number was growing. Wage premiums were going up as well at the same time. So that we didn't see, now everybody's going to college and it's not worth it anymore because everybody's gone. In fact, it became even more worth it as more people went. So it's not a fixed pie. When you have students go to earn college, they actually learn skills that help them in all kinds of facets of life, not just economic, and we've been focusing mostly on economic, but Londe mentioned earlier citizenship and other considerations. But as that happens, the pie gets bigger, and that's what we should want.
Right. I think it goes back to this question of economic growth and how do you think about ensuring economic growth. Hans was earlier talking about there are three ways to close that gap, and one of those ways is to increase, the number of students who are actually completing. And you can't get to that completion unless you deal with the equity issues, unless you ensure that Latino and African American students are graduating at much higher rates. We did some analysis a few years ago and learned that it would about 900,000. It would take about 900,000 students to be able to close that gap. That's how many more degrees we would need in terms of Black and brown kids that would need to finish in order to close the gap. So I do think that there are clearly capacity issues that we face as a state, but if we care about our overall economic prosperity, we can't get there without that.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed to our next panel now on enrollment trends with the UC, the CSU system, and our community college system represented. Okay, please begin.
Great. Good afternoon, Chairman McCarty, Chairman Medina, and members of the committees. My name is Pamela Brown. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Research and Academic Planning at the UC Office of the President. My office is responsible for producing the UC Accountability Report and the UC Information Center, both which were used as background materials for what you have in front of you today. I'm pleased to see these resources are being used and very open to any feedback on how we can improve them to support your work. On a personal note, I'm an alumna of the University of California. I got my bachelor's in applied mathematics and my master's in public policy from UC Berkeley. I believe in the power of public education and know how attending the university improved my life. So I'm dedicated to producing research that identifies ways UC can continue to improve our students' experience so they can succeed and go on to support the state's workforce need. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this information with you today. I'm particularly gratified to join my colleagues from the California Community Colleges and the California State University. As mentioned earlier, with roughly 70% of bachelor's degrees produced by California's public universities and colleges, it is critical that our three segments, in partnership with the state, work together to address California's degree attainment gap. To begin, the University of California will enroll an additional 5,000 resident undergraduates in 2016, above the 2014-15 levels. Each campus will be taking a meaningful portion of this increased enrollment, with UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego, and UC Riverside taking the largest portions. We are grateful to receive the support from the state to pursue expanding access. In addition, the university is making a concerted effort to increase the number of transfers from the California community colleges. In July, the university presented the first of 10 transfer pathways, which provide a single set of courses students can take to prepare for admissions in one of these majors across each of the 9 UC campuses. UC is preparing to release an additional set of transfer pathways for another 11 majors. In addition, this admission cycle, the university extended the deadline for transfer applications in order to shift a trend of flat or even declining transfer applications. This extension resulted in an additional 2,200 applications. Through these efforts, UC feels optimistic that we can make progress to achieving our goal of a 2-to-1 ratio for freshmen to transfer applicants. The university would like to partner with the state to sustain expanded access beyond the next academic year. We want to continue to work with the legislature to achieve state enrollment growth funding to help support the education of another 5,000 California residents so that by 2018-19, we will have provided 10,000 more seats for Californians over this 3-year period. As we seek to expand access, it's important to couple the growth of undergraduate students with the growth of graduate students, who can help with this teaching load associated with the growing undergraduate enrollment and support faculty in the research mission of the university. In addition, these highly educated graduate students go on to make critical contributions to the state's economy. Many UC academic, doctoral, and master's students work as both faculty in 2- and 4-year institutions and teach California's future college-educated workforce. A significant proportion of UC's physical, life science, and engineering graduates go on to work in the state's high-tech industries, including manufacturing, engineering, and internet and computer service industries. And UC's graduate professional service students contribute to California in everything from social work to law, business, and health professions, including public health, nursing, dentistry, and medicine. I would now like to address 2 issues that are no doubt at the forefront of your mind anytime we discuss access and enrollment at UC: the demand for UC education and the enrollment of non-residents. This year, more than 138,000 California residents applied to the University of California, and this increased demand could be seen across the system, including at UC Merced, which had the largest % increase in freshman and transfer applications. At the same time, we have also seen this increase in applications from domestic non-residents and international students. I want to acknowledge the concerns that have been raised about non-resident enrollment. The deep economic recession that resulted in significant decreases in state revenues and subsequent cuts to essential state services, including public higher education, has impacted us all. During these difficult budget years, you see increased enrollment of non-resident students, in part because these students pay a significant amount of non-resident supplemental tuition, over $24,000, and that provided necessary financial support to maintain the academic quality and course availability for all undergraduates. In addition, an increasingly global economy provided academic and educational reasons for educating California students in an environment with more national and international students. Currently, 15.5% of our system-wide undergraduate enrollments are non-resident students. With these non-resident students, when they graduate, at least half of the domestic non-residents and a third of international students remain in California, and we think these numbers are conservative. These students contribute to our state's economy, particularly in business, commerce, and high-tech industries. That said, we recognize there is a growing concern that enrolling non-residents means displacing California residents, and that is not true. UC maintains a steadfast commitment to meet our master plan obligation to admit all eligible residents, California residents who are supported, that 12.5% that we discussed earlier. And that is supported through the state enrollment funding that you've helped provide. Reductions in non-resident enrollment at a campus do not equate with an increase in resident enrollment. However, additional financial support from the state to provide support for educational costs associated with enrollment growth will result in an increase in resident enrollment. Funding expanded enrollment at UC is a good investment for the future of California and a key way the state can help reduce our degree gap. Over the decade, the number of bachelor degree recipients has increased by more than 8,000 to almost 50,000 a year. And of that, almost 44,000 are California residents. These graduates go on to contribute to our critical state workforce needs, including K-12 education, healthcare, and engineering and high-tech workforce. In addition, UC bachelor degree recipients double their earnings between 2 and 10 years after graduation. And for our Pell Grant recipients, often first generation and often underrepresented minorities, most of these individuals are earning more than their parents did just 5 years after finishing their UC degree. This kind of social mobility is critical to creating and maintaining the middle class in California. In fact, the New York Times described the University of California as California's upward mobility machine. Through its College Access Index, the New York Times ranked institutions on access, affordability, and outcomes, specifically looking at institutions with a higher proportion of Pell Grant recipients, lower net costs for low and middle income students, and at least a 75% 5-year graduation rate. Of the top 7 institutions, 6 of those were from the University of California. This success is not just the work of the university and its students by themselves, but the support of the people of California and the state policymakers who supported this investment in UC through state funds for enrollment and significant contributions from Cal Grant and middle-class scholarship programs. We hope to continue to partner with the state to increase enrollment opportunities for California residents at the undergraduate and graduate level. Thank you for your time, and I am open for any questions.
I think we'll try to go through the panels and then come back. CSU?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us to share about this important topic. My name is Nathan Evans, and I serve as Chief of Staff for the Division of Academic and Student Affairs at the CSU Office of the Chancellor and was formerly Director of Enrollment Management. This year, CSU enrolled more than 470,000 students across our 23 campuses. 1 in every 10 employees in California is a CSU graduate, and nationally, 1 in every 20 individuals with a bachelor's degree calls the CSU campus his or her alma mater. The CSU has had a long tradition of providing access to traditionally underserved communities. Today, 18 of our campuses are designated as Hispanic serving institutions, and 12 are designated as Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institutions. In addition, more than 1/3 of our students enrolled are the first in their families to attend college. Demand for CSU admission and enrollment continues to be at record levels. As evidenced in the materials prepared for today's hearing, student enrollment, as highlighted by fall term enrollment, has continued to climb. And as demonstrated by applications for admission, the CSU has continued to see year-over-year increases from new students. And while demand for CSU admission and enrollment continues to increase, state resources to support enrollment demand has not kept the same pace. After addressing inflationary and mandatory costs each year, resources available to support enrollment growth have been modest and incremental. California Education Code and the CSU Board of Trustees policy outlines the prioritization of our enrollment categories with the greatest consideration given to providing continuing students access to make progress toward their educational goals. During the most challenging years of the recession and resultant budget reductions, CSU campuses were forced to limit enrollment opportunities, both for continuing students in the form of fewer course sections and limited unit loads, and for new students in the form of reduced new student enrollment opportunities. While the picture is markedly improved since those most challenging times, enrollment demand still exceeds our funded capacity. In managing enrollment, CSU campuses focus efforts both on continuing students and new students. You will hear more about the strategies to impact current student retention and graduation in the next panel, but CSU campus enrollment planning and management includes the use of a variety of strategies to shorten time to degree and to maximize the distribution of enrollment, thereby making additional room for new students. And while campuses employ strategies to support current students and their progress to degree, it must be balanced with providing authentic access to new students. As outlined in the materials published for today's hearing, eligibility for CSU admission is explicitly outlined for first-time freshmen and transfer students. And while the pathway to CSU admissions eligibility has remained constant for more than a decade, the number of public K-12 students completing A through G courses, as reported by the California Department of Education, has continued to increase. Next, let me address a critical component of our mission, and those are transfer students. While growth in transfer applicants has been more modest than at the freshman level, when considered across the multiple terms of entry in a college year, including fall, winter, and spring, we have still seen growth. Within this pool, an increasing number of transfer applicants are electing to pursue the associate degree for transfer as their method of transfer preparation. In fact, we are seeing exponential growth each year, with over half of the students who ever enrolled into CSU with an ADT enrolled starting in fall 2015. Within this pool, increasing numbers are, as I said, electing this option. An important topic to also address is the concept of impaction. When an individual campus or CSU major receives more applications from CSU eligible applicants than it has resources to provide, it may be declared impacted. This may occur at the freshman level, the transfer level, or both. Impaction is an option of last resort for a CSU campus in our enrollment management toolbox, when a campus has exhausted all other steps to manage enrollment, but it is critical in order to provide authentic access to a particular campus or a particular major. And by authentic access, I mean being able to provide an offer of admission enrollment and having adequate resources to support that student in that major, not just in the first term, but in subsequent terms leading to graduation. Broadly, CSU campuses fall into one of three categories regarding impaction. First, a quarter of our campuses admit their entire entering freshman and transfer class based on minimum CSU eligibility. We then have a category of CSU campuses when, at the aggregate, have demonstrated campus demand, receiving more applications from CSU eligible students than the campus has resources to support, and we call this campus impaction at the aggregate level. In this form, applicants from the defined local admission area are admitted based on minimum CSU eligibility, while applicants from outside those areas are held to a higher standard. And then lastly, in a few cases, campuses have demonstrated demand not only at the aggregate campus level, but within each individual major on that campus. In such cases, applicants are considered by major at a standard higher than the minimum eligibility level, with some additional consideration for those applicants coming from the local admissions area or from schools with historic relationships to the campus. Through robust outreach and communication within the application tool, CSU campuses communicate the implications of admissions impaction to prospective students, families, and to our partners in K-12 and community colleges. A key component of this communication is messaging regarding applying broadly to CSU campuses, selecting campuses which are both impacted and not impacted. And applicants from low-income families are eligible for application fee waivers, which may be used for up to 4 CSU campuses. And while the CSU does not redirect all eligible students that are not admitted to an impacted program, we do redirect those who complete an associate degree for transfer, but are not admitted to an impacted program or campus. This represents only a small number of students who ultimately take this opportunity. And we have limited this redirection activity due to our effort to maintain commitment to authentic access as I described. As I mentioned, impaction is an option of last resort in CSU enrollment management. We regularly examine the pool of CSU eligible applicants who are not admitted to any CSU and assess where these students ultimately enroll. Of important note is more than half the students in this group only apply to one CSU. In these cases, the student is often electing to apply to one highly selective program in the CSU or a particular CSU campus, along with other highly selective national universities. And while the majority of those CSU eligible applicants who are not admitted to the CSU are ultimately served by the California Master Plan, including enrolling at a California community college, it does not diminish our concern about this reality. In sum, the CSU continues to see demand for student enrollment at all undergraduate levels. While incremental increases in state resources are improving enrollment opportunities for continuing and new students, a gap still exists between demand and opportunity. And we continue to address this. We remain committed to our ability to offer authentic access to students in collaboration with our partners in K-12, community colleges, and the University of California. Thank you.
Thank you.